You might have noticed some changes on the channel recently.
Like me! ¿Qué pasa, chavales? ¿Cómo estamos?
Like Anna becoming a full-time member of Marxism today. Like changing the profile picture to Che Guevara as a more general symbol of socialism. Like the format of videos changing.
And of course, the big one. We're transforming into a worker cooperative! Woo!
No more individualistic vanity channel based around me alone.
You're welcome, everyone.
Yeah, Anna's truly a gift to us all. But some of you might be wondering why this is all happening and what we're trying to achieve with all these changes. So today we're going to be discussing what has happened, why it has happened, and what the plans are for the future of the channel as a worker cooperative. Then we'll dive into a discussion about worker cooperatives in general, how we can understand them from a Marxist perspective, their pros, their cons, and whether they can play a role in the broader transition from capitalism to socialism.
It's going to be so fun, and you guys are going to love it, I swear.
But first, a word from today's sponsor.
Actually, we don't have a sponsor today.
That's true, we do not have a sponsor today. This video has been made possible solely by our supporters on Patreon, and we want to give a massive thanks to all of yous. It's because of you that we're able to produce socialist educational content that's not locked away behind any paywalls and that's freely accessible to anyone and everyone who needs it.
People are not taught about Marxism objectively in school. It's really hard to find an education on socialism that isn't just right-wing anti-communist propaganda. And most working people, myself included, don't have time to dig into complex texts like Marx's Capital. So media like this actually plays a very important role in introducing people to Marxism, combating capitalist lies, and overall raising the class consciousness of the masses. At least that's been our experience in engaging with other fantastic left-wing media outlets.
But what we do is impossible without your support. And I'm gonna speak frankly, right now, both of us are really struggling to get by.
Viewers, we are really struck to funk.
Between Patreon, YouTube ad revenue, and even the leftwingbooks.net sponsored sections, I personally make less than 2/3 of minimum wage. And yes, I've been trying to find extra work elsewhere to supplement the difference, attending interview after interview after interview, all to no avail. With the massive black hole in my CV from doing this channel full time for over 3 years now, plus the lack of any kind of references from my previous job because I got fired for union organising, to employers being able to simply Google my name and see, this whole channel, between all of that, I haven't been able to get even so much as a single job offer. Zilch. Squat. So this is my only source of income to survive, and with the cost of living crisis of the past year and a half, things have gotten honestly just really bad. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. So look, I'm gonna lay it flat out here. I need €1,500 a month from Patreon to get by. That plus the ad revenue and sponsorships should get me up to about minimum wage. And that's all I'm asking for, minimum wage. Not looking to get rich, not even asking for a living wage. Just need to be able to pay my rent, my bills, my internet fees, the fees for programs related to the channel like Adobe, Storyblocks, and so on and so forth. Just the basics, that's all. Specifically, I'm asking viewers of the channel from North America, Europe, or other parts of the global north to donate half an hour of your wage. So if you get €10 an hour or the dollar equivalent, please consider tossing half of that into the Patreon fund so we can keep providing socialist educational content to those who need it. If, and only if, you're in a position to do so.
And it's not just Paul that needs to survive either. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably know that I'm a student and a full-time worker who regularly needs to have like 2 jobs and a side gig to be able to afford anything. This summer, I've been waking up at the butt crack of dawn to drive to work 9 hours in the morning for $13.75 an hour in one of the most expensive and unwalkable areas in the United States. And despite this, my summer schedule is way less stressful than my schedule during the semester. Like last semester, I had 5 classes and they were all at terrible times, so I couldn't have like one full-time job to maintain during the entirety of it. So I had to have a clerical job, a part-time job, and an internship that was like half online, half in person, as well as like a writing gig on the side. And even with those 2 jobs and that writing gig, I only made like $1,000 a month in an area where the average monthly rent is $2,200. And every penny I earned from those jobs and that side gig went to gas and affording my required field school for my major in Ireland this summer. It's really physically and emotionally draining to have the majority of your day filled in by job 1 and then class that you're falling asleep in because you had to be at job 2 until 11 p.m. last night, and it took an hour and a half for you to get home in DC traffic, and you didn't finish your homework until 4 a.m. because of this, and then after that class have to go to job 2 again. It's really draining. What I'm trying to say is that I want to give my all to this channel. And honestly, it's really hard to do that if every single day I'm super exhausted, because apart from having my 5 classes that I have to attend, I also have to manage going to 2 jobs. Now, I don't mean to imply that I am the most exploited worker in the world, right? Because I am a college student in the Imperial Corps with a very supportive family who is able to support me in my learning. But I am a worker, and a constantly tired one at that. The process of making videos takes a lot of time that I wish I had, and I would have if I didn't have to spend so much time tiring my brain and my body out for pennies. If instead of exhausting myself out every single day because of this rigorous schedule that I'm forced to have because of lack of money, I could instead be compensated for the labor that I put in this channel, then I'd be able to both commit to making more educational and varied content for everyone who supports us to enjoy, as well as have a more social, healthy, and less stressful life. And of course, be a better community organizer and coworker in general instead of being notorious for never having time to chill and talk and strategize because I have class or I have to go to my second job.
So look, we're setting a target on Patreon of €3,000, which will be divided between the 2 of us 50-50, and which, combined with ad revenue and sponsorships, will provide each of us minimum wage for our labour. If you think we deserve minimum wage, literally just the absolute bare minimum required to survive for our work, then please head over to Patreon linked in the description box below and contribute just half an hour's wage. Again, this request is only applying to comrades from the global north who work and have half an hour's wage to spare. Thanks in advance, and thanks for listening.
Salamat po!
Alright, Patreon section's over, you can start listening again. By the by, these videos are all timestamped, so if there are ever any sections that you're not really interested in and you want to skip over to get to the good stuff, then feel free to just skip around to this bar right here.
Paul, shouldn't you have mentioned this before this section?
Oh, it must have just slipped my mind, I was up pretty late last night. Anyway, back to the video. Distracting twirl transition. So there've been some massive changes on this channel over the past few months. Reflecting the change in the channel from being an individual to a collective project, we've changed to a much less cringy channel name now, Marxism Today. The previous channel name, Marxist Paul, just never really felt right. It doesn't flow well, it's too clunky, it just doesn't work. Marxism Today, on the other hand, rolls off the tongue smooth as a cucumber. That was a weird analogy, I should not have said that. Anywho, in taking the emphasis off me as an individual, we've also changed the channel's profile picture to, well, a different individual. But our boy Che's an icon, damn it. A handsome icon with the blood of Irish rebels flowing through his veins. Alongside that, Anna has now joined Marxism Today, and we've begun the process of converting this into a worker cooperative, which, after 5 years of doing this channel solo, is a massive relief to me because now I finally have a co-worker to shoot the shit with. We've also begun experimenting with different video formats that blend video essays with discussion sections, essentially bringing in elements of podcasts. Speaking of which, we are currently working on setting up on Spotify as a video podcast, so watch this space. Or that space. The space that will exist in the future at some indeterminate point. You get what I'm trying to say. We're also not abandoning video essays. We do plan on still making them at some point, but we're certainly expanding into different forms of media, experimenting and seeing what does work and what doesn't work. Let us know down in the comments below what your favourite types are, whether they're video essays, podcasts, the blended format that we're using today and also used in the previous Barbie video, or anything else at all. And yes, we have finally started to branch out onto TikTok thanks to Anna, who isn't a feckin' boomer like me and who actually knows how to use them fancy high-tech mobile phone devices. What? Speak up, I can't hear you.
I said...
You what?
I said you're embarrassing us, old man. Sorry guys, you know how old people can be.
I heard that.
Whoops, forgot to finish the banana gag. Anyway, so why has this all happened? Why have we developed into a worker co-op? Basically, our channel is growing, and we want it to grow in a way that's most aligned with our socialist principles. This isn't fully possible under capitalist society, but it is partially possible. Rather than a private enterprise of capitalists purchasing labor power from proletarians, exploiting them and extracting the surplus value they generate through the system of wage labor, by developing a cooperative enterprise, many issues of capitalist production, though not distribution, can be mitigated. Building a worker cooperative increases the socialist elements of society as well as the economy, reducing capitalist relations and increasing socialist relations of production. And increasing these socialist relations of production at society's base will then increase the socialist elements of the superstructure, as we'll be able to agitate, educate, and contribute to the development of class-conscious proletarian culture, which will in turn then further positively influence the base, then the superstructure, and so on, helping to propel broader society towards socialism. And while far from perfect, hopefully in the future this can function as a foothold of socialist production and can be integrated into actual socialist society within worker states and a broader socialist world.
Oh, and she'll never say this, but the reason Anna specifically has joined up is because A, she's unreal, B, she has fantastic politics, C, she's hilarious, and D, she's really great crack to work with. We did a live stream a few months back where we were just shooting the shit and talking politics, and it was immediately clear to me that this was someone who I wanted as a comrade and a co-worker, and someone who shares a similar vision for what this channel should and could be in the future. So we kept talking, and now here we are.
Aw, Paul. I was actually super stoked when Paul asked me to go on live for his channel because I used to be a fan of his like stuff. So I was actually really nervous. So I actually went over to Kasama's house to record because I thought their room looked cooler than mine. And I was actually shitting myself before we started the live because I thought that Paul was gonna like interrogate me on like my knowledge of Marxism and like make fun of my room. But as I discovered on the live, as well as from getting to know Paul, meeting him in person and working with him, I found that not only is he an amazing student of Marxism that I admire, but he's also a very fun and kind person and an amazing coworker and friend. The one thing I will say, he's not the hippest kid on the block. Early 2000s called, they want their humor back.
Oof, Anna, you wound me. Early 2000s humour was just Family Guy style kooky randomness and people using the R slur. Fuck that. Though I definitely am an enjoyer of terrible dad jokes that make everybody collectively groan in despair. Hey Anna, where does the king keep his armies?
Where, Paul?
His sleeveys.
God damn it, Paul. Okay, despite that, I am really lucky to work with you, okay? I've learned a lot from you, but enough, okay? No more feelings. Enough.
No more feelings.
So what are our plans for the channel? As for content, we intend on continuing to create socialist education videos and podcasts. Vodcasts, you could even say.
Oh, vodcasts, you say? Okay.
Not those types of vodkas. How could you possibly think that's what I meant?
Another day, another banger.
Anyway, we plan on continuing to make socialist educational content. Longtime viewers of this channel, myself included, might remember the Socialism 101 series. But one of the challenges that comes with making socialist educational content is that it's hard to engage with higher level socialist educational material on its own terms. Sure, thousands of people are going to click a video that says, "What is communism?" But not that many people are going to click on a video that's called, "What is the tendency of the rate of profit to fall?" 'Cause like, who cares, nerd, you know? Now, our goal is to elevate the level of class consciousness to the widest possible audience. So if we want the broader masses of people to engage with higher level educational material, then it has to be done through a Trojan horse kind of model, aka under the guise of a less strictly educational video. Take, for example, our video on Barbie, as well as the one about like Andrew Tate, right? Ultimately, the goal of those videos is to provide proletarian feminist education and analysis, even if the people that initially clicked on it were not really expecting to hear that. So we're looking at media, current affairs, pop culture, and so on, and using these as vehicles for Marxist education, which will be able to reach a much broader audience who might not themselves consciously go looking for this type of content.
Exactly. Kind of like how we Trojan horsed our Patreon request into this episode about worker co-ops. Wait, was I not meant to say that part out loud? Moving swiftly on, regarding the more technical aspects of converting from an individual channel into a worker co-op, we've got a plan in place that's gradually progressing. Anna and I both work together in deciding what content will be produced, on writing the scripts for these videos, and obviously of course in recording our own parts, and so on and so forth. And with regard to money, since Anna officially joined up in June, the money that comes in generated from work that we've both contributed to is split evenly 50-50, including any money we get from sponsors. However, it has to be said that there's currently a massive imbalance money-wise, because there's 5 years of my work here making money and only a couple of months of our shared work. This is true with our Patreon too. Unfortunately, I'm not able to split the money I've been making on Patreon because without that money, I can't pay my bills. So we have a plan in place to rectify this. In the €0 to €1,000 bracket, which was accrued before Anna joined, all the Patreon money goes to me. In the €1,000 to €2,000 bracket, all Patreon money is split 50-50 as I need €1,500 to survive and this is my only source of income. Meanwhile, Anna currently has a full-time job, though of course this is massively challenging in its own right. And then in the €2,000 to €3,000 bracket, all of that money on Patreon will be going exclusively to Anna so that she can make the leap to full-time content production. So by the time we reach €3,000, we'll be on fully equal footing, with socialised production being matched by socialised appropriation. And of course, at this stage, there will be fully shared ownership and control on an equal basis.
Guys, let's make it happen.
And if more money comes in after that, we'll never take more than the median industrial wage. We may look into getting someone else on board as part of the co-op to help with things like editing, making thumbnails, and other aspects of content creation. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If we come to it. So, with these plans in mind, both in terms of the content being produced and how we're transforming the relations of production, Anna, what do you see as some of the challenges of building up the Marxism Today media co-op?
First and foremost, I think our biggest challenge is getting the money together that we need to make this financially viable for both of us as a fully cooperative enterprise. This mostly relies on getting the material support that we need from patrons. But at the same time, we need to step up our game and prove to our audience that it's worth their while to support this. In other words, we need to prove to our audience that what we're doing is actually socially important labor that is worthy of support.
Definitely, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do. Another challenge mentioned earlier that needs to be acknowledged is that full socialist relations of production and distribution here are impossible today. Worker co-ops in our current economic climate can only be a mixture of socialist and capitalist elements. Namely, socialized production and socialized appropriation operating through a capitalist mode of exchange or distribution. As Rosa Luxemburg explains, cooperatives, especially cooperatives in the field of production, constitute a hybrid form in the midst of capitalism. They can be described as small units of socialized production within capitalist exchange. We exist within a capitalist framework in a global capitalist world, and no matter what we do, there will still be elements of capitalism in both our production and our distribution, as the production of this content relies on the current global capitalist supply chains, with all of the exploitation and unequal exchange that this unfortunately is built upon. We see this in our means of production, like our computers, our cameras, our microphones, and so on, that are composed of materials extracted from the global south and assembled in various capitalist factories around the world. And of course, our distribution occurs primarily on YouTube, which is owned and controlled by Google, this massive capitalist imperialist multinational company. Yep, we live in a society, a capitalist society. And this partially stifles the ability to produce along socialist lines and almost entirely prevents distribution along socialist lines.
What we do, creating and releasing videos here on YouTube, isn't engaging directly in capitalist exchange. In the sense that, like, you, the viewer, gives us X amount of money and we give you the product that we create, the video. Instead, profits are realized by YouTube themselves primarily through ad revenue, and to a lesser extent through paid subscriptions. But yes, it is still ultimately operating within the context of capitalist distribution and can only be transformed into socialist distribution if it is connected to a larger, coordinated, international workers' movement. It's not enough for the workers of the world to own the means of production, but the means of distribution as well. So building towards a world of not just socialized production and appropriation, but distribution remains a challenge that cooperatives like this need to commit and contribute to overcoming.
100%, yeah. In terms of other challenges, we also need to recognise that in what we're doing, we're working completely against the grain. Capitalists can easily outcompete worker cooperatives on the market by relying on hyper-exploitative wage labour, maximising their productivity and strangling the co-op out of the market. YouTube is no exception to this. Another YouTube channel operating under private relations of production rather than cooperative relations of production can easily outcompete us. The reason for this competitive edge that they hold is that they can outsource almost all of the labour that goes into producing their products, be it a video, a podcast, or any other form of content. This is particularly relevant to those from the global north who participate in unequal exchange. Someone from the United States who has the money to do so can hire workers from the global south to do virtually everything that goes into producing content, and then realise profits far above and beyond that which the workers were paid for. For context, it's worth considering what goes into making content and what can be outsourced within that. You can roughly break it down into 8 categories. First, finding video topics, researching what's trending, what will help the channel achieve its goals, and so on, and then deeply studying the matter. Essentially, this is all research. Second, script writing, rewriting, and editing. Third, performing the script on recording, reading it on camera, narrating, etc. Fourth, editing and mixing the recorded audio. Fifth, editing the recorded video. Sixth, adding video effects, transitions, text on screen like impact text or quotes, background music, and so on to maximize viewers' engagement and hold their attention for longer, which in turn boosts content's reach with platform algorithms. Seventh, creating eye-catching thumbnails that stand out and grab people's attention. And finally, eighth, advertising and promoting the content across social media, including in some cases releasing short clips from the content, further related artwork, blooper scenes, and so on and so forth.
So out of the 8 categories there, a capitalist content creator could hypothetically only have to engage in 1/8 of the necessary labor, the video and audio performance, effectively making them a host of a show. And then they could employ cheaper outsourced labor for the other 7 necessary categories. For example, they could go onto Upwork or Fiverr and pay someone from a country with extremely low wages to do the work for a fraction of the price one might pay someone in the global north. Then they could realize massive profits from the global south workers' labor primarily, which the content creator could present as their own work by including non-disclosure agreements. And I'm not gonna lie, I personally know some Filipinos back in our archipelago who have done this exploitative work for some of the biggest YouTube channels out there. Those big YouTube channels really have the labor of those proletarians in the global south to thank for making the majority of the content that has made them millions and given them a dream house in Los Angeles. So how could we possibly compete with this level of international private production?
Well, to be honest, we can't win as worker cooperatives solely using capitalist market mechanisms, as we just get strangled out by those who are willing to engage in capitalist production and take advantage of unequal exchange, and who eventually monopolise the entire industry. The only possible sustainable avenue for success requires a different model, which relies directly upon the support of the people, such as through platforms like Patreon. So if you, our dear audience, consider this work to be socially necessary labour, educating and agitating the masses in a way that isn't locked off behind any paywalls and is free for all to access, then again please consider supporting us materially with half an hour's wage.
Money in the bag now. Just kidding, that was a joke. But it really wasn't. Please give us money.
You know, just very subtly Trojan horsing these things in.
Okay, so now for the big one. Are worker co-ops a path to socialism? What are their benefits and drawbacks?
Worker co-ops can be part of the path to socialism, indeed part of the construction of socialist society. But they need to be connected to the larger workers' movement to revolutionise the mode of production and distribution internationally in some way or another. Worker co-ops by themselves, in absence of a larger movement, don't have the ability to bring about large-scale socialist distribution, but they can function as a pocket of socialist production, a foothold, which can be brought into the larger movement for socialism at any stage.
Totally agree, Paul, and honestly, in my opinion, being part of building up and working at a worker co-op can actually increase one's class consciousness and solidarity. Because being at a workplace, a little pocket of socialism in a capitalist housecape, can prove to a worker that, hey, a better functioning society is possible if the workers have control over the means of production and appropriation, instead of being at the mercy of the capitalist class. The workers can determine their own wages, their own work schedules. They can run a business by themselves without the need of a private owner. They can even help elevate the level of class consciousness of people around them that are not part of the co-op. For example, the fishery in my own hometown has been a co-op since the 1980s, and I'm sure that just eating there with my family and asking why worker co-ops exist helped spark my initial interest in proletarian politics. When discussing how worker co-ops can fit into a broader movement to build socialist society, it's important to concretely consider their benefits as well as their drawbacks, their pros and cons. So first, what are the positives?
I think what's most interesting for us as Marxists is that worker cooperatives literally resolve capitalism's core contradiction between social production and private appropriation, matching social production with social appropriation, at least for the workers within that particular co-op. Indeed, within a capitalist framework, Rosa Luxemburg describes co-ops as operating with a socialist mode of production accompanied by a capitalist mode of exchange or distribution. But still, actually experiencing the socialist mode of production, at least partially, is nothing to turn your nose up at. The result of this is that members of worker cooperatives aren't alienated from the product of their labour. That awful sense of alienation that we get under capitalism of just being a cog in someone else's machine, which causes all kinds of psychological and emotional problems for exploited workers. The science bears this out too, with studies demonstrating that co-op workers' mental health and sense of well-being is significantly better on average than workers in capitalist enterprises. On a related note, cooperative relations of production create much healthier human relations than the capitalist worker dynamic, wherein the latter is being exploited by the former, and which leads to justified class resentment, regardless of whether the exploiter is a nice, kind, friendly individual or not. The capitalist, no matter how individually pleasant they may be, is ultimately still an exploiter at the end of the day. The next positive then, as mentioned earlier, is that worker cooperatives show workers how to run society for ourselves rather than in the interests of detached corporate shareholders or isolated individual capitalists. And next, worker cooperatives concretely build up the socialist elements in the economy, which can then be ready to go contributing parts of socialist society at a later stage, when the working class comes to power. Lastly, and specifically to this channel, while we do need to make enough to survive, we don't run this primarily for profit, or to maximise detached shareholders' wealth, or any of that kind of stuff. Our purpose instead is to simply produce use values in the form of socialist educational material that's freely accessible to anyone and everyone who seeks it. And indeed many who don't seek it, as much of the educational material is Trojan horsed in through things like pop culture analyses. In this sense, our cooperative is primarily an organisation not for profit but for a political task. To educate and elevate the level of socialist consciousness to as many people as possible so as to play our part in contributing to the collective movement for social historical progress. In other words, for socialism. So those are some of the main positives of worker cooperatives that come to my mind at least. Now, regarding some of the limits of cooperatives, starting again with our own little cooperative system, we're again not doing this for profit. So literally any other job in our respective countries would pay far, far more for a lot less work. So to anyone who's thinking that setting up a Marxist YouTube channel sounds like a nice way of making some money, please think again, it's really not. After doing this for over half a decade, I make less than 2/3 of minimum wage. And to be honest, I'm incredibly lucky to even be able to make that. The idea of ever making something as basic as a living wage for the both of us currently feels like a completely unattainable pipe dream, despite the fact that we work pretty much every waking hour of our days.
Yeah, tell me about it. So now broadening out to speak on the limitations of worker cooperatives in general. None of us are free until all of us are free. Our little island of socialism, which itself has capitalist elements running through it, in no way means that the workers of the world are free. Everyone else is still drowning in a sea of capitalist exploitation, and we and the other worker cooperatives are just standing on a little sandbank. This isn't good enough. As socialists, we seek to liberate the individual through the liberation of the entire collective class. And so we must remain firmly committed to achieving and realizing the liberation of all working people by playing an active part in the broader movement for socialism internationally. Another serious limitation is that workers and worker co-ops might experience social production and social appropriation, but distribution is still handled through the exchange system of capitalism. So it's not a complete system of socialist production and distribution. And this is a massive issue because, as we know, capitalist distribution is one of the main problems that the world faces today. So much so that despite the fact that we produce 150% of the food that we need to be able to feed the entire planet, millions of people still starve to death every single year.
Cooperative ownership of the means of production in the absence of a larger socialist framework with a plan to transition from capitalism to communism doesn't necessarily alleviate all of capitalism's problems, such as the crisis of overproduction, the falling rate of profit, the endless boom and bust cycles, and so on and so forth. Simply converting even the largest capitalist corporations in the world into worker cooperatives without a larger socialist movement won't automatically solve the problems of capitalism. ExxonMobil, one of the world's worst polluters ruining our environment, won't stop destroying our planet by simply converting into a worker cooperative. There needs to be a larger international framework and orientation towards socialist production and distribution in order to put an end to all of capitalism's problems once and for all. Lastly, we should also discuss an argument against cooperatives that some would consider accelerationist in the popular sense of the term, and an argument that I need to preface by saying I don't agree with. Some argue that worker cooperatives gut the revolutionary potential of workers precisely because they mitigate so many of the negative effects that workers experience under capitalism. The argument goes that workers in worker cooperatives aren't alienated from the product of their labour, and they don't experience the contradiction between social production and private appropriation which manifests in the antagonism between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. And so, not feeling like an alienated cog in the machine, and not feeling any great animosity towards the bourgeoisie, workers in these cooperatives may feel there's no need for revolution. This may lead them into reformism at best, or outright opposition to revolution at worst. There are similar criticisms of workers' unions, claiming that if workers unionise and they get all of their demands met to the point of living a comfortable labour aristocratic life, then they'll no longer want a revolutionary transformation of the mode of production and distribution. However, I don't buy this argument at all. You might be able to find a particular cruel logic in the argument, but the history just doesn't bear this out. There was a thriving cooperative movement in Russia prior to the Bolshevik Revolution, and this didn't hinder that proletarian revolution's development in the slightest. Same for China. There was a rapidly growing cooperative sector in China both before and after the CPC came to power in 1949. With worker cooperatives being one of the main forms of socialist development throughout the Maoist period, with many cooperatives readily transforming into people's communes as the revolution progressed. So it's important to look at history and real-world concrete practice when we consider these kinds of arguments, as the theory being put into practice can show us whether the argument is correct or incorrect. And in this case, it's clear to see that worker cooperatives didn't impede these revolutions one bit, but conversely, actually contributed to the development of the revolutionary process. So, to wrap things up now, returning to the original question of, are worker cooperatives the path to socialism? Worker cooperatives don't in and of themselves guarantee socialist society will be achieved, in the very same way that unionising your workplace doesn't guarantee that socialist society will be achieved. While these are important developments, they aren't the be-all and end-all. But as Marxists, as dialectical materialists, we understand that quantitative developments give rise to qualitative transformations. For example, when you increase the temperature of water by degrees quantitatively, at a certain point, 100 degrees Celsius, these quantitative changes of degree will lead to a qualitative transformation of the state of the matter, with the water now transformed into steam. Likewise, building up worker cooperatives, building up our workers' unions, agitating, educating and organising are all part of these quantitative developments necessary for the revolutionary qualitative transformation from capitalist society to socialist society at the international scale. In other words, all of these contributions to the workers' movement are steps along the way as part of the international movement to revolutionise the mode of production and distribution worldwide from capitalism to socialism. Setting up worker co-ops or unionising your workplace are not substitutes for revolution, but instead just pieces of the puzzle that is the larger international movement for the abolition of class society itself once and for all.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Marxism Today. Hopefully you found this useful in one way or another. A massive thank you to everyone who already supports us. We really couldn't do this without you.
Thank you Christian Napales, Rotgardist, Julia Affentranger, Blue Collar Red, BJB7, Jorio4, Andrew Smith and Michael Oxlong. Gur míle maith agaibh agus slán go fóil.
Buenas tardes, noches y mañanas casamas. Adiós y shalom.